Good morning to everybody. How you doing? Hope all's well. Keep up the excellent work. Today is Wednesday. Buy one, get one free. Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. Just eat it quickly because if you're taking it outside, you're going to have yourself a milkshake instead of an ice cream sundae. May Am Yisrael have a sweet life. Be'ezrat Hashem. We should hear beautiful things. We hope the hostages come home ASAP. We hope Hashem protects our soldiers and brings them home as well. And all of Am Yisrael will go to Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim Habnuyah Bekarov. We're continuing the laws of Bishul B'Shabbat, cooking on Shabbat. So we spoke about the other day, if you take a cup of pot of water and you cook it in the sun, you are allowed to do that, believe it or not, but you're not allowed to cook in that actual cup of water. If you want to take an egg and put it in there, you're not allowed to because you might get confused with a cup of water that was taken out of the off of the pot, off of the blech, off of the stove, etc. And therefore, our rabbis made a gezerah decree that you cannot cook in Toldot Ha'ur. That's from the Torah, and Toldot HaShemesh from the Chachamim, so no one gets mixed up. Which brings us to a question which we all have to get ready for, because we're all going to go to Yerushalayim Habnuyah Bezrat Hashem, and that is, what's the rule with a dud shemesh in Eretz Yisrael? Now, in America, you see on certain homes they have solar panels, etc. That is totally different than the dud shemesh that they have in Eretz Yisrael. The dud shemesh that they have, the boiler, the sun boiler, is not, it's a solar heated, but it's not solar energy. The ones we have over here is solar energy. Long story short, technically, that hot water that's in the dud shemesh is toldot shemesh, and therefore you won't be able to cook in it, like we're saying, because you can't cook in something that was heated up in the sun. And it's called a dud shemesh. It's a boiler that was, the hot water gets hot from the sun. How does it work if it's not solar energy? Simple. They have a glass panel with a pipe inside. They paint the pipe black. Black absorbs the sun rays, the heat, and put a barrel, a boiler, an insulated barrel that's empty on top of it, and heat rises, so the hot water goes and it goes into that item, and then it saves money because you don't have to open the boiler. In yeshiva, of course, it lasts for about 30 seconds. When we used to take showers in yeshiva, you had to soap yourself off up without the water on, and then when you finish soaping up, then you open up the water, because the dud shemesh in yeshivas didn't last that long. But it's a massive, beautiful invention. So now the question goes like this: in your home in America, if you have, or even in Israel, if they have an electric boiler, a gas boiler, where it's the old-fashioned boiler where you have a big tank, God shall watch everybody, filled with hot water. So you're not allowed to open the hot water with your hand in the sink, because what happens when you do that, the rabbi says, even though it's a girama, it's a cause and effect, still you should be mahmir not to do it, but he doesn't prohibit it 1,000,000%. Therefore, you're allowed to tell a goy to open the hot water for you. Of course, when it comes to showers, we'll talk about that. Showering is a totally different subject, even though a goy can open the hot water for you. The rabbis had to make a decree not to go into hot water because of the Gezerat Balanin, which we'll speak about, Bezrat Hashem, in another class. But long story short, since it's a cause and effect, you can have a goy open hot water for you. But you yourself, the rabbi tells us to be mahmir, because once you open the hot water in the sink, the cold water goes, the boiler empties out a little, and then cold water goes in automatically, and you're cooking that cold water. However, when it's a dud shemesh, the water that was heated up in the sun, and therefore it's only rabbinic to cook in an item that was heated up in the sun, as mentioned. And therefore, since it's cause and effect, the rabbi says no problem in Eretz Israel, or if you have a dud shemesh here, which I don't think there are any, you're allowed to wash dishes, wash yadayim, etc. With hot water from the sink. When I first moved back from Eretz Israel, and I came to good old Brooklyn, New York, and I opened that cold water in the sink, holy moly, is it freezing ice cold water? Now, when it comes to that subject, even though we're going off tangent, I can't help but say a story of Rabino Grande, Hamavadia. How great was he in every single aspect? He was a giant of giants, bigger than the greatest mountain in every way possible. But when it came to caring for others, boy, did he care, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, just like David HaMelech, as great as they are in Torah, that's how great they are in mercy and caring for others. When Rabbi Reuven Elbaz, he should live and be well, used to come to Hamadia's house to make milah. Hamadia was sandak almost 99% of the time. And of course, we had Yehi Shem for all those years. We're still not used to saying Tefillah David or the long Anna on a Monday and Thursday because we were saying Yishem all those years with the rabbi. But the rabbi only allowed a few mohalim to make milah if he was sendak. And one of them was Rabbi Reuven Elbaz, God bless him. Rabbi Reuven Elbaz would come to the rabbi's house. The milah wasn't like we have today. The food was not in Hamadia's house. Hamadia would have in the shul a kiseh shel Eliyahu, a milah chair. He would do the milah, and then they would go and take the baby home and go to another place to make the hafle and shalosh yirvu smahot b'Israel. So long story short, the Rabbi Reuven Elbaz used to wash his hands with soap and water in the rabbi's shul, and then come do the milah. One day, Hamavadia tells Rabbi Elbaz, do me a favor, go upstairs to my kitchen and wash your hands up there instead of over here in the shul. And the rabbi says, Rabbi, I'm okay. Rabbi Elbaz says, I could do it down here. I don't have to go upstairs to your house. He says, no. He says, how come? He says, because the water down here is cold. And the shuls in Israel, they don't have hot water like they have over here because it doesn't get as cold as it does here. And therefore, also they're a little tougher there. They can handle it. God should watch our nation, wherever they might be. But anyway, so there's no hot water in the shul downstairs. And the rabbi's hands were freezing after he finishes washing them. And when he takes the baby and he holds his legs, etc., it makes the baby uncomfortable. And Havadia was worried about the baby being uncomfortable. So therefore, he wanted the rabbi to wash his hands upstairs in his home. That is what we call massive, true greatness. So when it comes to the dud shemesh, like we said, you are allowed to open the hot water, no problem, on Shabbat. When it comes to over here, like we said, you can tell a goy to open the hot water for you. But you have to be careful, because believe it or not, when it comes to the old-fashioned boiler, that's what we call a cause and effect, a girama. However, they have instant hot water in houses. They have tankless water items, and it's a small item where the water goes straight through. Technically, that's not cause and effect. That's more of a problem. So if somebody has one of those, technically he can't even ask a goy to open the hot water in the sink. But with that, you have to ask your local rabbi for more specifics. The rabbi tells us also, if you have somebody has a faucet in the house to open up the heat and the radiators, you're not allowed to do that on Shabbat. That's prohibited from the Torah. It's not even from the Chachamim, because you're literally cooking in that situation. The cold water that's in the radiators now it was going to be filled up with hot water, and the rabbi tells us that's prohibited. Not that anyone's thinking about heat on a day like this for heating up your home. Yes, there is a meme going around that it says how thankful we have to be that it's not snowing, because imagine shoveling in this heat How you doing? But anyway, it could be that some people say, yes, we have to be appreciative for everything, which we really do. Anyway, back to our subject. So the rabbi then gets into the subject of cooking after cooking, which we touched on the other day. There is no problem when it comes to something that's majority solid to if it's already cooked, fully cooked, even though it's not well done, but if it's fully cooked, you're allowed to put it on the blech on Shabbat morning. Hence, we heat up all the maza, etc., of all the things that we eat on Shabbat morning, whether someone is having dairy, whether someone's having meat, etc. As long as you're having hamotzi, that's the main thing on Shabbat that counts. When it comes to holiday, we'll talk about another time. You have to have meat because en simha ela bebasar ve'yayin. So now you're heating up your items and you are allowed to. However, when it comes to a liquid, an item that's majority liquid, you're not allowed to heat it up on Shabbat morning, even if it was fully cooked, especially if it was not cooked before, like water or something of the like. You can't even take a cup of water and put it next to a blech, even if it's not on the actual blech, and you say you'll take it away before it gets piping hot. You're not allowed to do that because a person might forget, and then they're cooking on Shabbat. So Ashkenaz are a little more lenient when it comes to a liquid that was already cooked. If it's a liquid that's already cooked, that's still warm, Ashkenaz hold you're allowed to put it on the blech. However, Sephardic hold that you cannot put it back on the blech unless it's piping hot. Like we said, it has to be yatzole depo and hotter. But if not, you're not allowed to take a cold soup out of the fridge and put it on the blech in the morning. And we did mention in the past, because we hold like Shulchan Aruch, we are strict with that halacha. However, since it is a machloket, and there are opinions that say even a liquid item that was already cooked, you're allowed to heat up Saturday morning. We don't hold like them, but whenever you have a real machloket, not the machloket of Korach Va'adato, which we'll talk about Bezat Hashem for Parashat Shavua, when you have a mahloket that's peaceful between the chachamim and there's two real opinions, then you're allowed to tell a goy to do that item for you on Shabbat. So you're allowed to tell a goy to take out soup from the fridge and put it on the blech, no problem. And everyone's also aware that if your timer is going on 9 a.m. and you want to heat up your sahlab or your hot soup, etc., you're allowed to put it. Now, if it's raw, if it wasn't cooked, obviously you're not allowed to. But if it's already cooked, even though it's a liquid, you could put it on before the timer goes on. And then when the timer goes on, it gets hot, you are still good. The rabbi also tells us, what if somebody made an egg before Shabbat and it was soft? Is that considered cooking if you now throw it into a pot and make it a hard-boiled egg, where it becomes harder and harder as you cook it? The answer is, just because it's soft doesn't mean it's fully cooked. It's not fully cooked. If it's fully cooked, even though it's soft and more liquidy, however, if it gets harder and harder as you put it in hot water, you are allowed to, because we don't consider that cooking on Shabbat. Also, when it comes to something that is a dairy product, we also know you're allowed to heat it up on Shabbat. If it's a liquid like milk itself, then you could ask a goy to put it on for you, even though you didn't really cook it in a pot, etc., but it's pasteurized. And the rabbi holds something that's pasteurized, you are allowed to put it, it's not considered raw, and you are allowed to reheat it on Shabbat, because like we said, and bishul, ahal bishul. Now, when it comes to cooking, there's really different categories. You have cooking, like we said, in a pot of water. You also have roasting, which in halakha is called tziliyah. You have baking, which is called afiyah, and you have tigun, which is called frying. Frying is called tigun. All those categories are prohibited on Shabbat. Now, there are those that hold in the Ashkenaz world, if someone has a baked item, you're not allowed to cook it on Shabbat. Similar to what we said the other day, if somebody cooked something in a microwave on Friday, where it was raw before you put it in the microwave and now it got cooked, you really can't heat it up on Shabbat on a blech because it's a different type of cooking, and we're afraid it's not halachically considered cooked. So if you put it on the blech, now you're cooking on Shabbat. However, when something's baked or fried or roasted, you are allowed to cook it and heat it up on Shabbat. We are allowed to mix and match with all those different types of things. And Ashkenaz are strict, which means if someone has Turkish coffee that was roasted, Ashkenaz will hold that you have to be strict how you make Turkish coffee on Shabbat. Because if you put it in the cup first and then you open the urn, right? So what comes out of the urn is called irui kli rishon. It's pouring out of a kli rishon, a utensil that you heated up the food in, the water in, that you cooked it in, and therefore the flow that comes out does cook, and that would be prohibited to do on Shabbat according to them, because they hold if something's roasted, you can't cook it. Only if it's cooked can you heat it up. If it's baked, they hold you can't cook it as well. So if someone has a pot of soup on the stove and he wants to throw a slice of bread in there, make some mock matzah balls. All right. I have a friend, when he got newly married, God bless, his wife made matzah ball soup. So she just dumped the whole mixture in there and she asked her mother, how come the balls aren't forming? But if someone wants to throw bread in there, Ashkenaz are strict. However, Sephardi tradition hold it's allowed. And there, because even though it was baked before, we consider it that it's fully cooked and you're allowed to cook it. So anything that's cooked in a different fashion, you're allowed to heat it up on Shabbat as well. And we did mention the other day as well, you're allowed to make toast on Shabbat. If there's a piece of bread that's fully baked and you want to toast it, you throw it on the blech, you are allowed to do that on Shabbat. Now, regular instant coffee, of course, even Ashkenaz hold you're allowed to make it. How come? Because anything that's instant was cooked before. And since it was cooked before, you're allowed to cook it. But if it was roasted, like we said, Turkish coffee style, then you have to be careful according to the Ashkenaz tradition. When it comes to tea bags, we mentioned the other day as well that you should be strict. How the rabbi writes, you should definitely, it's not even a strictness. This is a halacha that if you're putting a tea bag in your coffee mug and you put it underneath the hot water urn and you open the hot water directly onto that tea bag, believe it or not, that's a problem on Shabbat. That's not a stringency that you shouldn't do that. That's a halacha because it's literally cooking on Shabbat. You're cooking the tea leaves. Tea leaves are not pre-cooked, and therefore it's a problem. But if you fill up your water first and then you throw the tea bag in there, that is allowed. But the rabbi does say, if someone wants to be mahmir, a little stricter, to put it in a kli shalishi, take that water from the mug and throw it into another cup, then it's allowed according to everybody. Are you allowed to take food out of a pot that's on the stove on Shabbat? And the answer is, if it's fully cooked, you are allowed to. But if it's raw, most definitely you're not allowed to, because then if you take some out, you're speeding up the cooking process. Could someone mix a pot while it's on the stove? Technically, better not to. If it's not cooked, it's asur. It's cooking on Shabbat. But even if it's cooked, the rabbi's not so into it while it's on the stove. But if you take the pot off, you have your fasulye with the flanking, and you want to give it a little good old mix. So you take it off the stove and then, or the blech, and you mix it, and then you put it back. You are allowed to have in mind to put it back, even if it's liquidy, more liquid than solid. If you have in mind and it's still piping hot, then you're allowed to put it back on, as long as you didn't put it in a different utensil. because once you put it in a different utensil, it's considered a kli sheni, and even though it's piping hot still, and you put it back into the item, that is a problem on Shabbat because you're taking a kli rishon, which even though it's physically hot, but it's not halachically hot. We don't go by quantity when it comes to cooking degrees on Shabbat. We go by quality, and once it hits a second utensil, a kli sheni, that's a problem to put it back in a kli rishon. That's why if somebody has a hamin on a Saturday morning, or a fasulia, or a good old cholent, right? We in the old days, a Sephardic from the community wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, but then Baruch Hashem, they're eating kibbeh, we're eating cholent, Baruch Hashem, one big happy family, and the unity brings Mashiach. So if somebody has an item that's drying out Saturday morning, we just hope it's not the bank accounts that are drying out, Be'ezrat Hashem. If someone has a food that's drying out, can you take water from the urn and pour it in there? And the answer is absolutely not. Ashkenaz hold yes, Sephardic hold no, because what are you going to do? You're going to take a coffee mug, a glass cup, or something, right? Obviously, not a cup that's used for hot milk, because then the cup is a little problematic. But you take a cup, put it underneath the urn, take hot water, and now pour it into a pot of hameen because it's dry, even though the water is piping hot. But once it gets to that kli sheni, it's a problem. It's halachically not considered really hot. And when you put it into the kli rishon again, you're cooking on Shabbat. So what do you do in those kind of situations? What if you put too much water on a Friday, then it might be too watery. And then if you wake up, it's dry. So what do? So the rabbi came up with a good idea, a good patent, as they say. And he said, if you take a bag, they have these bags that are made for cooking in the bag, and you put it inside the hameen. If you see Saturday morning that it's dry, you pop it carefully. Don't puncture it on top where it could come shooting out. Shema Israel. Do it from the side that it could go in, because over there it's still the kli rishon, and it's not considered irui from kli rishon. It's in the pot, and you're good. But that's a good idea if someone does have an issue. Another way you could do it is you could transfer it to another dish, then pour hot water in there, and then mix it up, etc. And that's how you should serve it. That's also allowed. We'll stop here for today. I hope everyone has the greatest day. Keep up the excellent work. We should have Besorot Tovot, Yeshua Vin Hamot, good health and happiness. All the best. Take care. Bye.